They were standing right out there by my mailbox, talking about me like I was already gone. 3 of them, church ladies, supposedly. One wore a wide-brimmed sun hat with plastic sunflowers stuck in it, like she was heading to a county fair. Another had them loud orthopedic sandals you can hear over your own heartbeat if you're close enough. And the third one, Miss Joyce, of course, had her mouth going like she'd swallowed a battery. I was sitting on my porch swing with a chipped coffee mug and lemon balm from my garden floating in the top, rocking slow, back and forth, the way my mama used to when she didn't want to curse in front of company. Even though these women weren't up on my porch, they were close enough my ears didn't have to strain. She's still got that same little rusty car, Miss Joyce asked with a chuckle that carried clean across the yard. I swear it's been held together with hope and duct tape since 1999. I saw her at the Piggly Wiggly last Thursday, the one with the hat added, wearing them Walmart shoes again. Poor thing. Somebody should tell her that modesty ain't the same as dignity. And that house? Miss Joyce continued, wagging her church bulletin like it was a wand. That porch is leaning. I bet if her dog barks too hard, the whole thing'll fall over. Funny thing is, I don't even own a dog. I took a long, slow sip of my tea. It was still warm. Not as warm as my cheeks, though. Not from embarrassment. That passed a long time ago. No, this was something else. Something sharper than sorrow, quieter than rage. I kept my body easy, my spine loose, like someone half listening. But let me tell you the truth, baby, I heard everything. Every word. They laughed. The kind of laugh people give when they think you're no longer in the race. Just there to wave from the sidelines, wearing your grandmother's pearls and too much perfume. But what they didn't know, standing at the edge of my yard talking like I was invisible, was that I had already sold everything. House, car, old tools in the shed. Even the pressure cooker I hadn't used since my husband passed. Sold it all. That morning, the wire transfer hit my account like thunder behind a cloud, silent to everyone else, earth-shaking to me. And with it came a kind of peace I hadn't felt in 20 years. Not freedom like people talk about on bumper stickers. No. This was a deeper thing. Like stepping into your own skin after everybody told you for years it didn't fit. They started walking away after a while. One of them waved like I might not have heard the insults, just their footsteps. I raised the corner of my mouth just enough to call it a smile, and gave a little wave back like they'd just dropped off cookies instead of disrespect. Let them enjoy their last little walk around the cul-de-sac like they were queens marching through the French Quarter. They didn't know their kingdom was about to fall. The truth? I could have corrected him. Could have stood up right then and let him know just what they'd missed about me. But I've always believed that dignity don't raise its voice. And sometimes silence bends louder than thunder. The first mystery I reckon you're asking is, why in the world did you sell everything, Ora Mae? And baby, I promise I'm gone. Get to that. But first, let me take you back a bit. Back to the why. Back to them quiet nights sitting in a chair so old it creaked like it had stories to tell. Back to a patch of land nobody valued till it was valuable. Back when I almost believed everything they said about me. Let me tell you how it started. 6 months ago, late February, deep chill and ice on the porch railings. I remember because I slipped on that top step, taking out the garbage, and bruised at the same hip I hurt birthing my youngest, Marcus. That morning, I made my usual breakfast. Grits thick enough for a spoon to stand up in, and sausage patties I'd gotten on discount from a cousin who knew a cousin who worked a closing shift. Then I sat down with my tea and opened the letter. Not email, not a text. A letter, good thick envelope, cream-colored, the kind rich folks get their monograms pressed on. The address was handwritten, careful print, No loops, no flourishes. That told me it was from a lawyer. Inside was a folded document. Type was crisp, one sheet, simple and cruel. Eviction notice. Not for missed payments. No, I owned my house outright. Had the deed pressed between 2 pages of my old family Bible. This was something else. The land under me had been rezoned. They were running new utility lines and water systems. And the developers filed paperwork to reclaim surrounding property for urban adjustment. That's what they call it when rich folks want your roots to make room for their brunch. I sat there in my worn flannel robe, fighting the sting in my eyes. Not tears, just pressure building behind them. Now, I could have filed an appeal, gotten a lawyer, but legal fees talk louder than truth these days. And besides, I'd seen this coming. Quiet rumors, surveys being done without notice, white trucks parked just off the street with no license plates. So I called my realtor. Not a friend. Don't have many of those left in this town. Just a number I saved from a magnet on my fridge. "It's Ora Mae," I said when she picked up, breathless, like she'd been chewing lunch in a hurry. "I'm ready to sell." "Wait, what?" She sounded shocked, not because I wanted to sell, but because she didn't think I owned enough to sell anything worth her time. That's the funny thing about people with titles. They only look at what's above ground. A ragged roof, a faded porch. They don't check the foundation. But I knew what I had. I didn't just own the house. I owned the lot beside it, flower bed and all. And 2 more down the road that had been passed into my name when my cousin Jasper passed on without a will. Plus my daddy's old workshop behind the creek. Been boarded up so long most folks thought it belonged to the city. It didn't. It was all mine. I hung up the call and sat back, hands folded across my lap, and I just breathed. Because I realized, in that quiet, that I'd spent 17 years waiting for someone to see my worth. And that morning, I stopped waiting. Now let me tell you what happened 2 days after that call. I was at the Piggly Wiggly, aisle 3, shopping for cat food even though I ain't had a cat in 4 years. Some habits die slow. I heard my name. "Ora Mae? That you?" I turned, cart half full, and there she was. Lillian Mae Watkins, bank branch manager, junior league darling, matriarch of the biggest gossip circle north of Ashgrove. She looked me up and down once, then set her face into a tight smile. "Still shopping at the Piggly," she said, chuckling. "Bless your heart." You know what's funny about that phrase? It's the only blessing that's meant to cut. I smiled anyway. Softly, the way you do when someone steps on your toe and says sorry before you scream. Lillian kept talking. Asked if I needed a loan or any help arranging financial services. Said she was just being neighborly. I said I was fine. "You let me know if you ever need to discuss." "Reorganizing," she added. "We have great transitional products for women. Of a certain stage." Let me explain something. Transitional is Southern for we think you're dying real soon. But I stood there, right in front of the cat food display, and thanked her. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out the business card my real estate attorney gave me, and handed it to her. "You let the bank know if y'all need help processing those new title transfers on Windridge Lane," I said. The look on her face? That alone was worth 20 years of making casseroles for the same women, who never once invited me to dine with them after Sunday service. And I walked out with my groceries. And my power. Y'all ever had a moment like that? One of those Sundays where you almost shout inside the store? Tell me in the comments if you've had a time where keeping quiet was louder than any comeback you could have made. Because that day, I didn't just keep walking. I smiled. not the kind you throw over your shoulder. No, this one came from my feet. I got home that afternoon and laid them groceries on the kitchen counter. Same chipped laminate I'd had since Bill was alive. A little warped near the sink where the faucet dripped back in 2012. Folks would have laughed if they knew I still had the same toaster that burned one side and left the other pale like it was shy. But I didn't care much about toasters. What I did care about was the envelope waiting in my mailbox. Thick, expensive, the kind that don't fold easy. It smelled like new ink and sawdust when I tore it open, like something fresh and dangerous. Inside was the first offer. They wanted my land. All of it. Not just this little home I rocked slow in. Not just the backyard where my old swing sat rotting under the pecan tree. They wanted the forgotten lots down by the creek, too. They offered double the city estimate, triple what most people thought I was worth. You know what I did? I laughed, baby. Full belly. Real out-loud laugh that scared the blue jay off my porch rail. Because if they were starting this high, they were scared of what I could do if I held out. That meant they weren't in control no more. See, power don't always bark. Sometimes it walks slow, parks crooked in a beat-up Civic, keeps to itself in church pews. Sometimes power waits until everybody's tired of fighting. Then it just buys everything, quietly. So I called my lawyer, Calvin Brooks. Same man that did the paperwork when my husband passed. Said, Calvin, I want clauses in every sale contract. No development until after I close all my sales. He said, Ora Mae, that ain't how these folks like to work. They buy as they go. I said, then tell them I don't sell piece by piece. I sell when I say so. And if they can't wait, I'll find someone who can. I heard him smile through the phone. You always disdirect with your negotiation. Only when folks mistake dust for desperation. Early March passed slow, wind stinging, pollen blowing early. Yellow dust caking my porch screens like powdered sugar with a grudge. And sure enough, my little signs of change started getting noticed. Miss Joyce stopped clipping her grass with shears and started watching my front door like it might pop open and answer her questions. Then came the Sunday after service. I walked straight out praying and ran into Mr. Dawson, the HOA president himself, standing by my car. Same faded Honda, same cracked taillight. And that little Jesus bobblehead still shaking on the dash every time you hit a bump? Mr. Dawson had on his salmon-colored sports coat, that one he wears when he's trying to seem friendly but prepared for combat. Ora Mae, he said. We've received notice that parcels along Windridge might be shifting ownership. Any truth to that? I smiled. And if there is that a good thing or a bad thing in y'all's bylaws? Well, it's curious. Curious at the very least. I mean, transition of property without notice makes folks wonder. Wonder what? He blinked. Just the health of the neighborhood, you understand? I leaned in close, soft voice. Mr. Dawson, when I had a tin roof that clanged till 3 a.m, and a water heater that moaned like a ghost trapped under the floor, this neighborhood didn't wonder a bit. It didn't check on me. It didn't ask if I was eating good or if the lights stayed on through the winter. His mouth opened, then closed. So if y'all wondering now, you gon' have to keep wondering. Then I got in my car and drove slow. I saw his mouth moving in the rearview mirror. But I turned my radio up. 3 days later, the moving truck pulled into my driveway. It was small, no big scene. My furniture was already secondhand, and my keepsakes fit into boxers I'd labeled by hand. Kitchen, photos, Mama's dishes. Receipts I never threw out, but probably should have. This wasn't a moving day. This was a molting, shedding old skin so new land could grow. And right about the time the last box hit my lawyer's back seat, I got a knock on the side door. Nobody uses that door except to people. One of them's dead. The other wore a brown cap and smelled like lumber and peppermint oil. Mr. Harold Harmon. He was holding a paper bag and a cane he never really leaned on unless he needed sympathy. Heard through the tree line, he said, voice just soft enough to not be a threat, that you might be planning on disappearing. I didn't answer. He reached into the bag and pulled out a still warm lemon pound cake. The kind with real zest in it, not that bottled imitation mess. I raised an eyebrow. This, you fishing for goodbye or gossip? He chuckled. Neither. Just figured you might want a slice of something sweet on your way out. I let him in. We sat at the little metal table in my kitchen. Single bulb overhead, buzzing loud like it hadn't slept right in weeks. He poured tea, unasked, the way old men do when they're trying not to ask what's burning behind your eyes. You ready to leave this behind? I stirred honey into my glass slow, watched it pool at the bottom. I ain't leaving it behind. I'm taking it with me. Just changing shape. He said. Paused. You sell the car too. Tomorrow, sealed buyer. Says they want it for restoration. He smiled. You know, Ora Mae, folks down here, they see a Civic and think it's calling you poor, but it's really been calling you smart. You drove it longer than some of these folks stayed married. I chuckled. That was the first laugh I let out in days that didn't feel like it cost me something. He tapped his hands on the table twice, then looked serious. Don't let him shame you for moving different. You built quiet wealth. That's rarer than noise, rarer than new coats and Sunday whispers. I looked up. Funny, I said. They didn't notice me until I started packing boxers. That's how it go, he smiled. They hear silence louder when it's the only thing left. That night I sat cross-legged in my empty bedroom, air mattress, one pillow, and a single lamp glowing warm next to me like old Christmas light. I thought about my husband, about how he used to say, "Baby, we ain't poor. We're just I'd laugh back then, thought he was making me feel better. But Lord knows he was right. Because now, sitting in a house everyone thought would crumble before it sold, I had more offers than a county auction on tax land. I checked my phone. One voicemail. It was Calvin. Miss Ora Mae, I need to talk to you. It's about that contract. Turns out Lillian had some dealings on that parcel nobody disclosed. Might be more going on here than you thought. I hit play again. Then once more. More going on than I thought. All this time, I'd been planning for strategy, for silence, for legacy. But now the story was about to get even messier. And I was ready. Baby, let me tell you. The train had already left the station before they realized I was the one driving. The voicemail hinting at secrets inside the deal, a hidden hand, maybe even sabotage. The thing about peace is, it's quiet. Not peaceful quiet, though. Not birds chirping or morning after church silence. More like the stillness that comes right before a tornado sets the trees screaming. The kind that makes your skin hum, like God is holding his breath and waiting for you to notice. That was the kind of quiet I felt after I listened to Calvin's message that night. Sitting on that air mattress, lamp glowing like a memory beside me. Something's going on with your parcels, Ora Mae? That's what he said. Now mind you, I'd already signed paperwork, secured wire transfers, escrowed the funds, and triple-checked the retirement funds tied into the investment account. I wasn't worried about the legal stuff. Not really. I was worried about the part folks don't put on paper, the unseen hands moving behind closed-room deals. And maybe some part of me, deep down in a place I didn't dust as often as I should, wondered if I was stepping too far ahead of myself. That's when memories come in like uninvited cousins. Loud, all elbows and sharp opinions. One of the first ones that came, like it does when I sit too long, was him. Harold. Not Mr. Harmon this time. No kind neighbor with lemon pound cake. No, this was my husband, Bill. He had that habit of drumming his fingers on his thigh while we talked numbers at the kitchen table, always the third finger tapping twice after the rest stopped. When the insurance payout came through after he passed, I remembered that sound like it was playing in my bones. He told me once, "You watch, baby. Don't matter what's in your hand if folks decide you're too small to be holding it." That's why I didn't cash out after he died. I invested, quiet, consistent, small cap stock folds, some real estate trusts, dividend growth funds, nothing flashy. Nothing that would tip off a town living off rumor and grapevine rot. Took 15 years, but I built something solid. So when Calvin said there was something wrong in the paperwork, it wasn't fear I felt, it was recognition. I'd felt this same hum right before Bill passed, when I knew a doctor's voice was about to tell me something my heart already heard. That hum's never been wrong. Calvin told me to come by the office next morning. So I pulled out a blouse I ironed 3 times, even though nobody but the receptionist was gone. See it? And I got into my Honda one more time, let the wheels creak into motion like old bones relocating. Calvin's office hadn't changed since the early 2000s. Still had that dark oak paneling and a fake ficus plant in the corner with dust so thick it looked like it had roots in the drywall. The carpet was that faded, burnt orange color that was supposed to say respectable. All it ever said to me was, "Ain't been vacuumed right since the Bush administration." He stood up when I walked in. Tall, trim, hands tucked in his pockets like he wasn't about to deliver confusion in paragraph form. "Ora Mae," he said, motioning for me to sit. "I don't like this." I just sat and waited. I may not have his law degree, but I know the value of letting a man talk himself into a full sentence before you offer one of your own. They're trying to expedite, but not through us. They're making development offers on land, parcels that ain't fully released yet. Someone already applied to access your zoning permissions before you even accepted their original offer. "Who?" I asked, sipping the bottled water he always handed out with the label curling at the edges. He pulled out a manila folder and set it in front of me. My name printed neat across the top. Inside weren't property scopes or blueprints. Just one page. An access request filed by the Heritage Hill Development Group. Filed 6 weeks before I agreed to sell. And co-signed? There she was, Lillian Mae Watkins. Her signature was clean, controlled, exactly how folks stay powerful in small towns, bold enough to move quietly. Calvin watched my face. "You knew they were circling," he said. "I knew buzzards when I saw 'em," I murmured, "but I didn't know she already had her claws sunk in." I leaned back, letting that settle. Here's the thing. Folks treat gossip like sugar. Sweet when you're the one listening, sour when somebody serves it right back to you. Lillian had served a banquet over the years, all sugary insults glazed in Christian charity. I wondered how long she'd been licking her lips watching my properties age, figuring I'd croak in the cold or get moved out by friendly development. Problem was, I didn't croak. I kept records. Back when Bill ran construction sites, he made me log every square foot of land he worked. Said, don't trust dirt that someone else writes the story for. So I pulled a copy of every deed out of my purse and laid it on Calvin's desk. Not just the house, not just the inheritance lots, the mineral rights. He blinked. Where'd you get all this? My granddaddy taught black men to read contracts barefoot in a field full of white sheriffs, I said. Taught his daughter the same? She taught me. We don't let go of land around here. We bury it in history. He grinned. Then maybe we let Lillian think she's winning for a while. What Calvin didn't know was I had already made my next move. 2 weeks earlier, before any formal offers came, I found a spot on Main. Old storefront, been a fabric shop once, then a payday loan place, then sat empty long enough to sprout grass in the tile cracks. No one wanted it 'cause it had mold problems and a roof half-eaten by rain. But I could see it different. And more than that, I'd learned something wild. The property sat directly in the redevelopment corridor, meaning its value was about to multiply fast. So I bought it quiet, created an LLC under my middle name, Eleonora Holdings, paid cash through Calvin's brokerage contact in Des Moines. No direct link to me at all. Then I took a walk. Folks saw me out there with my canvas tote and thought I was shopping for tomatoes. I was shopping for block control. 4 additional storefronts on the street had liens on them. The kind that gets flushed with a little attention and the right tone on your voicemail. Within a week, I owned all 4. Still never used my name. Just set it all one domino away from toppling the Walsh-backed project Lillian was funding through the bank. See, revenge is like chess. You don't aim to kill the king fast. You make them run out of moves first. Now, I reckon you're thinking, why was all that necessary, Ora Mae? Why buy moldy buildings? Why let women with flower hats call you pitiful? Why hide behind LLCs and let people think you're senile when your memory's better than their hard drives? Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and realized everybody in it had already decided who you were? Not based on what you said, what you wore, what you drove, what your countertops looked like. They measure you in square feet, not kindness. Folks love modesty when it stays quiet, but let it speak and suddenly it's pride. I was tired of being humble for the comfort of small minds. So I built something they wouldn't see coming. 1 week before I signed the final papers, I walked past the house behind the church. Quiet little brick place, green awnings, always smelled like bounced checks and borrowed time. Miss Joyce lived there. I stopped on her sidewalk. The way a person stops when their knee gives out mid-step but they pretend it's to straighten their back. She saw me, froze. I waved slow. Not flashy. Real easy like. And in my head, I already knew. That house. I'd own it by spring. It rained the following Thursday, but not a soft kind of rain. The sky opened up like it had a grudge, water slapping sideways against the old storm door on my rental place like it was trying to test the hinges. I never liked those in-between homes. Not a motel and not a house. Just something that smelled like air freshener over mildew and had carpets so low it felt like rough paper. I was only there because appearances matter, and I needed the kind of appearance that said she's finally giving up. So I watched the rain fall like it owed me something and waited for the next piece of the game to move. And wouldn't you know, it did. Miss Joyce came pounding on the door like the building was made of meat and she was starving. I opened it slow, no surprise on my face. Just apron strings still tied from chopping carrots in a kitchen I didn't plan on washing dishes in twice. She didn't come to visit. She came to hiss. "You sold, didn't you?" she snapped, mascara leaking rain down her cheeks like she'd been watching a sad movie alone. Whole block. To the people trying to turn this neighborhood into a coffee mall or some such mess, I leaned against the frame and looked her over. Her sandals were soaked straight through and one fake nail on her right index finger was snapped clean off at the tip. Her anger seemed less like pride and more like panic in pearls. "You think I sold to them?" I said calmly. "You think you know who I am?" "You've always been quiet," she said. "But nobody stays quiet without hiding something. Now let me pause for a second. Have you noticed that the people most mad at you for keeping secrets are the same ones who never really asked about your truth in the first place?" I looked at her, and something slid into me. Not pity, not spite, memory. Memory of when her husband left her in '03 and she had no gas money and I slipped a 20 in her mailbox without a name on it. Memory of how she called me pothouse poor in front of choir practice 3 months later, not knowing. "You all right, Joyce?" I asked gently. She blinked like I'd slapped her. "What?" "You look tired," I said. "Like something heavy's been sitting on your chest and you think if you yell at me loud enough, it'll jump off." She opened her mouth, then closed it, took a half step back. I'm just trying to understand. The church fund those little donations, it all made it seem like like I was surviving instead of building." I offered. "I didn't say that. But you thought it." She stood in the rain after that, her mouth hanging open like maybe a whole new understanding was pushing its way through. I didn't say another word, just closed the door soft, the way I do when something's already dead on the other side and don't know it yet. After I locked it, I sat back down in the living room and looked through the file folder Calvin had sent me by courier. Inside were the final approvals. My LLC had completed 3 mergers under its investment clause, acquiring the local print building, a part of the farmer's coop, and a defunct bakery listed as commercial surplus. 3 legally binding purchases. 3 of Lillian's planned anchor tenants wiped off her map. It wasn't just poetic. It was possession. And she'd see the name that had done it when it was already too late to react. You ever wake up and realize that the way they painted you, simple, sweet, pressed, and quiet, wasn't a picture? It was a storybook they wrote without asking your pages first. I had a drawer full of those stories. Dresses donated by people who assumed I needed them. Potlucks where my dish was the only one. Folks asked if I washed my hands. Canned drives where they filled grocery bags with kindness and named them blessing bags without asking if I needed to be blessed. I kept all of it, tucked into a mental filing cabinet with a lock called Patience. And now that I was the one holding the deeds and calling the brokers, it wasn't pride I was feeling. It was power. Gentle power. The kind a current has right before the flood. You don't raise your voice when you're the one the town's about to talk about. The next day, I sat outside the coffee shop on Main, the new gentrified one with the kind of lattes people spend more on than a week's worth of eggs. I wore my oldest shawl, the one with a loose stitch down one side, hair tied, no earrings. Just Ora Mae and her full, simple truth. Lillian came out of the bank, 2 storefronts down, click-clacking in heels that had opinions, talking on a call I knew wasn't just social. She saw me, slowed, thought about wavering, and didn't. Then she turned her head like I was bird droppings on a car mirror, something that might be a nuisance if acknowledged too long. She sat in her car. At that exact moment, Mr. Harmon came walking down the sidewalk, brown coat buttoned tight against the cold and a little spring in his limp. He caught my eye and grinned, that slow, good grin that feels like your favorite hymn's about to play on the piano. I poured an extra spoon of sugar into the second cup on my table. He sat, nodded, polite, then leaned over. "She don't know," Does she? I sipped my drink and let my smile show just a sliver of teeth. She'll know by Monday. See, timing ain't just biblical. It's strategic. My final auction date was Monday morning. Not for my old house. That had already changed hands. Only problem was, nobody realized the LLC who'd acquired it was mine. Calvin and I made sure the digital trail ended, with a holding pattern and briefcased men who spoke like spreadsheets and lived in Atlanta. The same Monday, the Heritage Hill Development Group would be submitting their public plan proposals at the Chamber of Commerce meeting. And guess who had just acquired the deed to the parking lot adjacent to their strategy map? Me? Well, technically, Eleonora Holdings, LLC, a woman and minority-owned cooperative trust fund. Funded in full by yours truly. We'd even listed one board seat for Ania, my granddaughter. She still thought of her future and semesters and babysitting gigs, but I was already putting bricks under her baby's feet that nobody would bulldoze without facing me first. See, power that lasts. It has to look forward. Not just around. Saturday morning came quiet again. I woke with the sun curled lazy against my cheap lace curtains. The kind of light that says, get up and finish what you started. Calvin called me around 10. Said the announcement would be public by noon. Lillian's group would be forced to delay construction permits pending the new commercial ownership audits. And when they saw who owned what, they'd have to renegotiate everything. Expect calls, he said. Let him call, I replied. Phone rings. Doesn't mean I have to pick up. Around 2 o'clock, it started. First voicemail, from an anonymous development firm. Second, from a chamber rep asking if I'd attend Monday's meeting despite being just a transactional entity in a larger system. Third one came from Lillian herself. She didn't leave a message, just called twice. Then texted, Ora Mae, we should talk about wind. I read it once. Then again. You know what tone a text has to carry to make you hear the fake sugar through a screen? That was it. Didn't reply. Not yet. Waited until 8 o'clock that night, when I knew she'd had time to pace that expensive kitchen with marble counters bought on borrowed interest. Then I called. She answered quick, like the line barely had time to ring. Ora Mae? She said, voice sweet and stalling. I didn't know you were invested in downtown redevelopment. I think there's been some crosswire. You don't know what I'm invested in? I said calmly. Silence. You've been co-signing documents without land rights, Lillian? That's a violation. You tried to move dirt you didn't own. I was told those parcels were. You didn't check, you assumed, I interrupted. Another pause. Then a breath. Ora Mae, surely we're not on opposite sides here. You never put me on your side, I said. You put me under your nose. And with that, I ended the call. That conversation wasn't mine to finish. It was the silence afterward that would do the talking. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever stood small on purpose so someone else could feel tall? Not out of weakness. Out of mercy? I'd done it for years. But not anymore. I sold everything. But I didn't lose anything. I traded space for control. I traded silence for scale. And come Monday morning, when that map lit up and half the arrows pointed to a name they'd never bothered to research, the whole room would do what folks like Lillian never expect. They'd go quiet. Just like Miss Joyce. Just like Dawson and his salmon blazer. Just like my Civic when I turned off the engine one last time outside the meeting hall. Keys flat in my palm, smile full in my chest, and a folder tucked under my arm marked Eleonora Holdings, Strategic Phase 3. I wasn't finished yet. Monday morning didn't come loud. It came soft. Skies still gray, air too warm for February, one of them strange southern days that makes you question the calendar. I woke up before my alarm, heart already beating like it had something to say. I laid there for a while, eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow over my temporary bed in that little rental. Nothing fancy. Walls thin enough to hear your neighbor's shoes scrape tile. But I didn't need quiet today. I needed clarity. Because that day was the day a room full of people would realize who I'd been all this time. And baby, let me tell you something. There is no sound more holy than the silence when the truth finally walks into the room. I pulled on my good pantsuit. Not flashy. Deep green. The same color as the head wrap I wore to my son's graduation. The color my mama called money modest. I didn't wear any perfume. Didn't need to. That day, the only scent I planned to leave behind was presence. The Chamber of Commerce meeting was at the Civic Hall downtown. Place smelled like polished wood and old politics. Stackable chairs sat in tight rows under buzzing lights, the kind that made even confident people sweat. Lillian was already there. Standing near the front, clipboard in one hand, planner tucked tight under her arm like a shield. She wore that ivory blouse she always wore at public things. The one with silk so light you could see the outline of her pearls through it. She didn't see me at first. I made sure of that. I sat 3 rows from the back, behind a woman with 3 screaming toddlers and a man whose cologne could cause asthma on contact. Didn't bother me. I was comfortable in the back, because I knew whose name would come to the front. They started with the usual updates. Committee forms, funding reports. People murmured, nodded, shifted in their seats. But then the room hushed. Mayor Unsell stood up, tapping the mic. We're now reviewing zoning implications and revisions from the Heritage Hill revitalization proposal. Today, we announce recent ownership changes and reconsider permitting conditions affected by last week's audits. I watched Lillian cross the stage, confidence in her shoes, shoulders set straight like a schoolmistress, ready to assign homework. She hit her mark. Too bad the chalkboard was about to erase her lesson. She smiled. Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to confirm that our development group has completed preliminary steps with projected tenants awaiting clearance. The following parcels were initially listed as project anchors. She began listing lots, numbers, street names. Windridge Lane, Southfield Corner, Market Street leases. I watched her lips form the words like she was directing a choir. Until the mayor interrupted. Ms. Watkins, he said, flipping a paper in his binder, there's been a change. She blinked. Excuse me. Updated audit came in this morning. Per request from the State Real Estate Office. All listed parcels had to be confirmed under state-level cross-reference. And right then, the microphone squealed a bit. Feedback, like the room itself was reacting before the people had a chance. Lillian adjusted her posture. Yes, of course. I'm sure everything's accounted. The mayor cleared his throat. These properties have been redeeded within the past 60 days. Buyer listed Eleonora Holdings, LLC. He looked up. Owner of record, Ora Mae Henderson. Silence. Not polite silence. The kind that drops like a lead goose in a duck pond. 3 seconds. Then it hit. People started turning. Heads snapped around like baseball fans following a foul ball. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I just sat, hands folded in my lap, like I had nothing in the world left to prove. Lillian stood still, jaw clenched. eyes glassy like someone staring at an optical illusion too long and realizing it ain't a trick at all. She tried to speak. I wasn't made aware that this will need clarification. The mayor nodded, polite but firm. We reached out last week but received no documentation to dispute the transfer. Ms. Henderson's LLC submitted all necessary tax certifications and legal formalities beyond what was required. Full legitimate control has been granted. Somewhere in the middle rows, someone said, "Well, I'll be." Another person whispered, "Is that the Ora Mae? From Windridge?" I thought she moved out. I didn't blink. Didn't nod. Didn't offer smile or frown. Just stayed still and let the moment bend around me. That's the trick, baby. When they finally see you, let them stand in it. Let them feel what it's like to measure the space where they used to put you and realize that space grew without asking them first. Lillian stepped down. Almost tripped. Caught herself on her own clipboard. The pearls shifted on her neck like they were trying to hide. Someone tried to speak after her. One of the businessmen from her side of the table, Gordon something, but his voice cracked. Halfway through, like he'd just learned a new law of gravity. Then I stood. Quiet. Didn't march to the front. Didn't adjust my suit bold. Just walked. The sound of my heels on the linoleum floor tapped like a metronome against all that embarrassment thick in the air. Mayor Ansel looked surprised. I gestured politely. He moved aside. I took the mic. "Good morning," I said gently, like I was reading a church announcement and not rewriting a legacy. "I don't have anything long to say. Some folks spend a lot of time explaining why they do what they do." I let that breathe just a second. I believe you can tell a lot about someone by what they do when nobody's clapping. Another pause. I don't plan to stop growth in this town, but I do believe growth should include the people who held the line when the storms came. Folks say we protect heritage, but sometimes what we really protect is control. A man near the front stirred, trying to interrupt. I looked right at him. Didn't ask for silence. Just gave it to him first. Eleonora Holdings was designed to create business opportunities managed by people who've never been treated like businesses mattered in their name. We've already opened contracts with 3 Black-owned firms across the county and a 4th from a farm cooperative. Someone clapped once, then another. I looked at Lillian. "It won't be loud. What we're doing," I said, "but it will last." Then I stepped back, handed the mic to the mayor, and went back to my seat in the 3rd row. Not front, not hidden, just visible. Fully, completely, for the first time in years, unapologetically alive in the truth of who I'd always been. Back at home that evening, well, the rental's still. For now, I got a call from my son, Marcus. He was out west, calling from an area code I still didn't remember the name of. He'd heard. "Ma?" he said, voice soft with that mix of shock and pride only grown sons manage. "Is it all true?" "Depends," I said, sipping tea I'd reheated for the 3rd time that night. "What part?" "That you just became their landlord?" I smiled. "I became myself, Marcus. What comes with that is on them." He laughed, soft, like he didn't know how to hold it in. "You always were a little slippery." I nodded, eyes on the night sky out my single-pane window. "They greased the path, baby. I just walked." When someone finally sees who you really are, the next few days are real quiet. Not respectful, quiet. Cautious, quiet. Like the town's holding its breath, trying to see who else go and speak up, or if it's best to wait till your power settles. That's the kind of hush that carried over Cedar Oaks for the rest of that week. I could feel it walking to the mailbox every morning. No more whispered, bless her heart, or half smiles when I passed by. Just nods. Some tight, some reverent. Most confused. The best part? Nobody knocked on my door. Not for 3 whole days. Not till Saturday. And wouldn't you know, it was Lillian. She showed up just after dawn, car parked sideways like she was too nervous to aim straight. Still wearing that same ivory blouse, but it was wrinkled now, tissue peeking out her purse like she'd been crying in motion. I saw her through the window. Didn't move. She paced a little bit on the porch, then finally knocked with the kind of tap that don't want to be labeled desperate, even if it is. I opened. She inhaled to speak, but I just raised one hand. I put the tea kettle on, I said. Didn't offer her past the porch, though. That kind of humility gotta pay admission. So she stood under the awning while the steam hissed low behind me. And when I brought her that chipped cup, same one she once called quaint, at a church fundraiser, I handed it to her with both hands. I wanted to talk, she said finally. I waited. I didn't know we were in opposition, she murmured softly. Our families and history already divide us. I sipped my tea. Lillian, you already divided us? I didn't notice. She flushed, admitting she misjudged us. I'll step aside in the heritage deal, letting your group lead. I looked at her, not through her eyes or down on her, just at her. Would you offer me grace without my help? I am offering you dignity, peace, and a legacy, not a place in your neighborhood without your efforts. Her voice broke a bit on legacy. I saw the truth in her eyes. She was afraid of losing her town's respect, but not losing her dignity. I am offering you truth. Lillian, my legacy is not built on cooperation with those unable to call me neighbor. It's built on trust, survival, and resilience. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Sister Harmon. Not Mr. Harmon's older sister, Elaine Ruth. Sweet woman with her Holy Ghost gossip, as she called it. Child, I heard Miss Lillian tried to get your pastor to mediate peace between y'all. I almost dropped my tea. With the courage, didn't she? Asked Sister Harmon, asking if reconciliation could be part of Sunday's benediction. I laughed, full out. She wants church ballots to replace contracts. She can't spell accountability, baby. But she sure knows who's to blame when the mirror gets too clear. Thanking her, I reminded her, this wasn't revenge or personal gain. This was exploration and finding a truth she was trying to hide. Just by opening the window, the wind blew in the old shoeboxes under my bed. There I found the fragments of my story, the beginning of a legacy I never knew I needed and that she couldn't keep hidden. Church was thicker packed than usual. I knew why. Every pew held eyes pretending they weren't squinting sideways to see what I'd do. I didn't walk different. Didn't sit different. Didn't sing louder or longer. Just turned to the page, bowed my head, and let the word do what it always did, remind me that vindication ain't victory unless you can lift someone else with it. Pastor didn't name names. But he did say one thing that settled in the room like dust on a warm fan blade. The Lord said, silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the sound his children make when they're building something too strong to say out loud. I know he looked at me, but I didn't look back. I already heard what I came to hear. After service, while folks were handing out cross-shaped peppermints to stuck together to separate, little Sister Moss tapped me on the shoulder. She's 12 now. Gangly, bright eyes, always looking for meaning behind grown-up words. She said, everybody says you beat them at their own game. I knelt a little, met her gaze. I didn't play their game, baby. I just remembered the rules they forgot. Like what? Like land talks louder than gossip. And money don't make folks worthy. But kindness? That's currency too. She nodded. Then she asked me something I didn't expect. Will you teach me? Not business. Not finance. Teach me how to be quiet, strong like you. I touched her shoulder, real light. I'll teach you how to walk big with a small purse and louder ancestors. And y'all, that's the moment that stuck. Not the council gasps. Not Lillian's silence. Not the deeds stacked high in my rental drawer. Her? That little girl asking to learn how to live with silent strength, because in that whole room full of eyes, she was the only one who saw me and didn't flinch. She wanted to stand taller, not just richer. And that's worth more than legacy. That's immortality. The first time I walked past my own name printed on a window downtown, I didn't tell nobody. Didn't stop. Didn't pose. Didn't even take a picture. Though one of the neighborhood boys later told me he saw it in the reflection of the barber shop. Just walked right on by that new sign, printed tall and clean. Eleonora Holdings, Office Suite number 203. Black lettering on smoked glass. Classy. No frill. And I saw my power for what it had become. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just present. Like something that had been there the whole time, waiting on space to breathe. Folks noticed it though. I could feel the eyes when I passed. Could feel the ripple every time I turned a storefront light on early, just to check feng shui and dust patterns in a building they thought nobody cared about. I pulled up one morning in a rental car, a simple charcoal Camry, and a man across the street with a leaf blower actually stopped mid-blow and nodded. Didn't say a word, just nodded. That nod carried 50 years of shifted weight. It said, I know your name now. By Wednesday after the chamber meeting, folks were treating me different. The girls from choir called, asking if I'd return as treasurer. The community center asked if I'd consider sitting in on committee plans for the food pantry next quarter. Even Mr. Dawson remember his salmon blazer? He dropped off a little potted jasmine with a note taped to the plastic. Your presence has inspired much needed reevaluation. Let's collaborate. HOA Council. I watered the plant. Didn't call him back. They could spend a little time with uncertainty the same way I did for years. Just let it bloom wild on their porch for a while. Make them smell it before they understand what grew there. I was sitting in my office the next day, second floor. Morning sun soft through shutter slats, when my granddaughter Ania walked in. Didn't knock. Didn't need to. She carried her laptop in one hand, bag draped on her shoulder. And the kinda look young people wear when they're still deciding how to feel about something they're proud of. She set her things down and stared around. Grandma, this looks like a real business. I smiled over my glasses. It is a real business, baby. She walked slow to the window, looked down over the street, hands on her hips, her curls tucked into a bun higher than I'd ever seen mine grow when I was her age. You own almost everything in this picture, she said. I don't own people. I own opportunity. She looked over her shoulder, eyebrow raised like I said something too poetic to be real. You getting ready to leave it to me? That hit a little hard. Because, no, I hadn't told her all of it yet. Didn't want her to feel pressure before she asked for purpose. But she spoke again before I could answer. I don't want it if it's just an empire. I froze. She turned fully, locked eyes with me like grown folks do when they've set something down soft in a conversation, waiting to see if you pick it up with care. I want it if it's a house, she said. A house with a door wide enough for other girls like me? I set my pen down, walked slowly over to her, rested my hand on her back. It can be a house, I whispered, but only if we build it with scale and stillness. Only if you lead with your questions, not your pride. She nodded, put her hand over mine. And in that moment, I knew. Legacy had found soil. Later that evening, while I was sitting on the floor going through balance sheets and handwritten spreadsheets from back when I didn't have a single office computer, Mr. Harmon called. Said he was outside using my driveway. Didn't ask permission. Said my lights were too pretty not to sit by him. I laughed. Told him, I got apple cider on the stove if your knees can handle a stoop. He chuckled and said, I ain't bending for beauty no more. I'm sitting on it. So I brought him cider and 2 thick slices of sweet cornbread. I'd made that morning in a pan older than most of my savings accounts. We sat in silence for a long while. Then he spoke. Can I say something you might not want to hear? I smiled. I'm too old to blush. Go ahead. You changed this town. I shrugged. Maybe. No, maybe, he said, voice steady. You flipped it clean upside down and made everybody look at their own feet. That warmed something in me I'd kept locked a while. Not because I needed credit, but because somebody saw it and said it out loud. That kind of truth hits different when it don't cost you effort. He raised his mug of cider. 2 quiet queens and Crown Vics. I raised mine back. To men who knew before it blew up and stayed anyway? He blinked, mock offended. You saying I look like a blown-up man? I laughed so hard I spilled cider right down my sleeve. Worth it? Later that night, I stared at my phone too long before dialing. All I did was send one text. To Lillian Watkins. Parcel C is open. We'll consider community bids through March. Submit with dignity, not decoration. I never got a reply. Didn't need one? There's a kind of victory you don't celebrate with applause. You just stand in its breeze and let the dust of other people's assumptions blow right past you. The thing about momentum is, once it starts turning, it keeps pulling folks along. Even when the ones being pulled don't like where it's going. By the time March rolled in, you couldn't walk a block through town without hearing somebody mention Eleonora. Holdings with a tone that sat somewhere between envy and confusion. They weren't used to change that didn't ask for permission. They were used to negotiations behind closed doors, words polished clean for public meetings, progress served with a shrimp cocktail and a press release. But what I gave them? I gave them return. Return on decency, return on patience, return on land they thought held no value just because the porch paint had peeled. At the first open vendors meeting that month, Anya took my seat. Not just symbolic, necessary. She walked in with her curls loose, spine straight, and a stack of folders tucked in one arm, each one color-coded, each one with a mission. People noticed, but they listened too. Because before the meeting, I took time. Stood behind her in the hallway, my hands fixing her collar, whispering what my mama used to whisper to me before Sunday readings. Stand in it, baby. Your feet already earned the floor. Your name just gotta catch up. She smiled, quick and honest, and then she walked in. Didn't glance back once. That's how I knew she was ready. She opened with grace. Good afternoon. I'm Ania Mae Henderson, Community Manager for Land Development at Eleonora Holdings. That shook folks first. Co-founder Ora Mae Henderson has temporarily stepped into portfolio oversight. I'll be leading public engagement and resource distributor relations going forward. That shook them again. I stayed in the side hall, out of view. Could hear the clip of her voice echo across the cheap tiles like it had always belonged there. Could hear her answering questions I hadn't even thought she'd be asked yet. Someone complicated asked something snide about vendor preference, trying to hint that hiring Black-owned or women-led was political. Ania didn't flinch. She said, "Equity isn't politics. It's correction. And correction's long overdue." "Lord, help me," I almost shouted right outside the door. Afterward, back in our office, I startled her by clapping slow from the chair she'd sat in just 2 weeks earlier, asking if she could grow tall in this place. She jumped, then laughed. "You scared me?" "No, baby," I said. "You scared them." She smiled, nervous, but proud. "You heard it all," I said. "You earned their confusion and their awe. That's when you know you're doing it right." We shared a quiet moment. The windows were open, spring teasing its way through the air with that muddy lavender chill. "You're gonna build something bigger than me," I said. Ania looked down for a second, then met my eyes. "I'm building with you still in it." That made me go still. Not quiet. Still. There's a difference. 3 days later, I got a certified letter. Plain, white, business standard. From a law office I hadn't dealt with since 1999. Inside was something surreal, not a threat. An offer. Lillian was offering to buy me out. Said she'd secured private funding to reclaim land essential to the original downtown redevelopment plan. Full ask, 30-day close. That letter didn't surprise me. What did? Was the handwritten postscript at the bottom. "Ora, I see now what I didn't want to before. Maybe I always saw it, but couldn't admit it. Some people get to be prophets. Some of us just whisper old maps and pray they still point in the right direction. I hope you'll consider making room for both of us. L." I read it 3 times under a lamp with barely a bulb left. Then folded it once. Tucked it in a drawer. And never wrote her back. She'd had decades to say those things with her mouth. The time for small-town poetry had passed. You ever had something settle inside you so deep it felt like bone? That's what happened that night. I climbed into bed finally in my home again. Permanent now, furnished with chairs that matched and paint that didn't peel and just listened to the quiet. The kind that ain't lonely. The kind of quiet that means everything's where it ought to be. Mr. Harmon had dropped off fried okra and cabbage earlier that afternoon. Barely said a full sentence. Just nodded his goodnight and left a little sticky note on the foil pan. "Y'all made the winds shift? Do you feel it yet?" I read that note a dozen times. Final confirmation I didn't need, but was glad I got. I closed my eyes that night and remembered the porch. The real one. The old one? With beams that creaked. With chipped paint on the railing and screen doors too proud to hang straight. I remembered the women whispering at the mailbox like ghosts who got too used to haunting ground they thought nobody had claimed. I remembered the sound of their laughter. The smell of rain on cement. My Civic parked crooked like an old woman folding her arms. And I remembered what it meant to stay quiet long enough that your footsteps turned into sermons. Now I sleep in a different kind of quiet. One that holds the sound of a granddaughter building blueprints upstairs. One that keeps contractor printouts on my fridge next to church potluck reminders. One that doesn't ask for appearances. It celebrates seeds. And baby, If you've ever thought about selling everything, I'll tell you what I learned. Sometimes what you're really selling ain't the house. It's the grave they dug for your self-respect, thinking it would hold you. And when you sell it smart, what you're doing is paving it over. Foundation strong, walls wide, a door that swings open for whoever walks with heart and honor. And when they see it, they'll stop, and they'll go quiet. Not from shame this time. The first thing I did when spring came was open every window in the house. Not just for the breeze, not to knock out old dust, but because I wanted to remember what fresh air felt like after a long winter where I held my breath too many days in a row. I didn't own the same four walls anymore, but the rhythm of a home. That never leaves you. You bake sweet bread on Sundays. Let the butter cool slow on the counter. Sweep corners even when guests ain't cumin. Set 2 mugs on the table even if you're drinking alone, just in case company shows up too honest to knock. That's the kind of home I built again. Not bigger. Just truer. And sometimes, when I sit under that wide front window with a book I only half read because my real attention's on the world outside, I wonder what they say about me now. The ones who used to whisper where the grass grew patchy? The ones who laughed at the Civic before I traded it for quiet keys and newer tires? The ones who said that a woman with salt in her hair was done building? I wonder. And then I remember, I don't have to wonder no more. Because now they ask for permission to speak on my name. And Nia was sitting across from me yesterday, the both of us sipping tea, papers between us like bricks waiting to be laid. She's designing an expansion now. Some kind of shared space for women-led copes downstate. Wants to call it the Seed Room. I told her it sounded a little too close to a gardening podcast. She said, that's the point. You plant legacy in places where no one thinks to look. Couldn't argue with that. And what do you say when the child you raised becomes the wind you sowed? Nothing. Except maybe, make sure the rent stays affordable. She laughed at that. Wrote it down like a law. She might have board of directors now, baby. But she ain't forgotten who taught her what power sounds like when it don't shout. Some afternoons, I still go walking. Up the same hill people used to say I couldn't make it up without resting halfway. They were wrong about that too. I walk easy now. Not to prove anything. Just to remind my body I'm still here. Still claiming space with every step. Last week, I passed the bakery we bought and flipped. Used to be a pawn shop before that. Then sat vacant for 6 years. Now, it has yellow walls inside. Cinnamon in the air. Baked goods named after local women who held this community up when no one clapped. Patrice's pecan wheat. Miss Rhonda's blackberry loaves. And tucked right near the counter, Ora's honey corn muffins. They asked permission, of course. I just told them, spelling counts. Yesterday, Miss Joyce left a pie on my stoop. No note. Just a slightly misspelled return address sticker on the bottom. And a silent understanding that never needed to be spoken aloud. I didn't eat it. But I did smile. Forgiveness don't always come warm. Sometimes it just sits politely in a box until you decide what to do with it. And sometimes, the gesture is enough. There's a final story I want to tell you. Not about land, or legal power, or bank signatures. About something smaller. It happened not long ago, at the hardware store. I'd gone in looking for garden hooks. Come spring, I hang lavender by the back porch to keep critters from getting bolder than they deserve. Young man working the counter asked, Mrs. Henderson, are you the Ora Mae? I told him I was an Ora Mae. there's more of us around than folks realize? He said he heard about what I did with the town, that he called it the quiet buyout. Said he and some of his friends recorded episodes talking about it. I didn't quite understand what a podcast was then. Still don't fully trust the word. But I asked him, real gentle-like, what did you say when you talked about me? He looked me in the eye. Sad, we said you didn't fight back. You just sat still until nobody could ignore the weight of your presence anymore. I blinked. That don't sound very revolutionary. He smiled. It was. He rang up my hooks without charging. I slipped a 5 in the tip jar anyway. Because silence is power, yes. But we still pay generosity when it shows up unannounced, asking for nothing. I don't know what your story is, baby. Whether you've been quiet too long, or been underestimated in rooms where you used to sweep the floors. Maybe they mocked your house. Maybe they scorned your car. Maybe your dresses didn't shine the way theirs did under the chandeliers. But let me say something, and you hold on to it. You are not your porch paint. You are not your steering wheel rust. You are not what they could or could not imagine. You are what you've been building quietly. Maybe in savings nobody's seen. Maybe in dignity they overlooked. Maybe in the strength it takes to drink your coffee every morning, walk through town, and still smile at people who think they broke you. You've sold nothing of value. You've just been collecting your worth the whole time. And when you're ready, you stand still. Let them notice the silence. Let that silence carry your whole name like scripture. And let them feel what it means to go quiet. The porch I sit on now don't creak. It's new, sure. Wide beams, pressure treated, blessed by a family friend with a name engraved in the wood on accident. The finish still smells faintly like lemon oil and new beginnings. But sometimes I miss the old creak. Not the pain in it, but the memory. The rhythm. That place used to bear the weight of every quiet thing I carried, every judgment I swallowed, every whisper I refused to spit back. And I reckon you don't know how strong wood is until it teaches your posture how to survive. But this new porch shit don't remember the pain. It only knows what stood still long enough to outlive the insults. Last week, we had one of them block cookouts. The kind that starts with flyers, stapled to telephone poles, and ends 8 hours later with gospel on a Bluetooth speaker and little girls drawing chalk crowns on the sidewalk. They tried to make me be the honored guest. I said no. Said I'd bring the potato salad and someone else could make the speeches. But come sundown, a few folks started gathering near my spot. Didn't say it out loud, not all at once, but one by one, they drifted over, plastic chairs dragging behind them. One lady, new to town, asked who I was. Before I could speak, a young boy high schooler, still smelling like bravado and barbecue, said, "That's Miss Ora Mae. She owns half the truth around here." An older woman next to him whispered, "She saved this town." Anya, walking by with her lemon ice in one hand and blueprints under the other, just grinned and said, "Nah," she reminded it who it belonged to. That part I couldn't answer to. But I did scoop myself another helping of peach cobbler and let them talk. I'd carried the story long enough. It was good seeing it walk without me for a while. NEA's community complex broke ground last month. She brought me the first brick with my initials carved in it. Told me they were placing it under the foundation, not to hide it, but to anchor it. She said, "I want every hour that pours into this place to start with your silence and end with your strength." That child of mine, she speaks like she's been listening since birth. Maybe she has. Maybe all I had to do was survive publicly while she watched quietly. And maybe that's enough. I keep a notebook now. Not for money. Not for spreadsheets or speeches. Just 4 stories. Elders, names, dignities that when undocumented cause too many folks die folded before they get accepted open. I tell myself maybe someday someone will read 'em. Maybe even you. Because baby, if you sitting across from me right now, whether with a cup of tea or tears in your eyes, I need you to hear me clear. None of this was about revenge. Not really. Not even close. It was about remembrance. About holding on to a version of yourself that mattered, even when they tried to sell your worth at a discount. It was about selling moldy ceilings and stained driveways, so I could buy back the acres of my silence and plant something new there. And it was about making sure no one does to you what they tried to do to me. Quiet woman. Small house. Rusty car? They thought they saw lack. But what they saw was discipline. What they dismissed was foundation. And when I sold everything, I didn't lose a thing. I just watched them go silent, one by one. Because what do you say to a woman who wore shame like Stretty Ann, turned your Snickers into soft apologies? What do you say when the porch you laughed at becomes the stage you're asking to step onto? You don't say much at all. You just go quiet. And when they do, don't shout. Just smile. Let M feel it. Let your story do its own talking. Now, let me leave you with this. I tell real stories like this one, the kind you don't hear on the news or wrapped up neat. The kind that change you, the kind that teach you something about yourself, while you're just trying to drink your coffee and mind your business. If you want more like this, baby, go on and subscribe to Tales of Ora Mae. Have you ever been underestimated? Ever been looked at like you were the ash they scraped off someone else's fire? Ever had your porch judged harder than your purpose? I want you to tell me in the comments. I want to know I ain't alone. Tell me your story. And if this one touched you, if you felt it deep down in your bones like I felt it, living it, drop a heart. Not for me. For the you who's still building. And when they go silent, you just keep walking.